Today's message, I will discuss the impact that your environment can have on your life. I call it three men walking. First, I must tell you about a guy that I met when I was 7 years old. When I was 7 years old, I saw a guy walking down the street. He walked with a long stride and a well-timed rhythm in each and every step. He didn't miss a beat as he walked. He was wearing a really cool hat that was slightly tilted. His arms were long and his legs were lanky. I even noticed the man was wearing some cool multicolored socks. He seemed to not have a care in the world as he strolled by and patrolled the streets. He smiled at me and told me a very funny joke as he strolled by. We traded laughs as he continued down the street towards the alley. In that moment, I felt that he was the coolest person in the world for sharing a laugh, for sharing a joke, and providing a moment of joy for me. He provided a moment of joy at a time when I really needed it. I was 7 years old, but as I reflect back on that day, I realized the guy that walked with the cool rhythm and with a nice smile, he was hiding tragedy that day. The reason I noticed his multicolored socks that day was because he didn't have any shoes on. I now remember his toothless smile, his smelly clothes. I even remember his funny yo mama joke that's not so funny today. He only wore socks that day because he had just sold his shoes so that he could get a fix. Question. Today I asked myself, why didn't my 7-year-old eyes notice the flaws at the time? The guy was a street hustling drug addict on his way to an overdose. Answer. I didn't recognize it because he acknowledged me. He acknowledged me with a smile. He told me a joke. He spent a moment with me. He made me laugh at a time when I really needed one. But we must be careful. We must be careful because tragedy often will hide behind smiles. Well, as I reflect back on that day on the drug addict, although he seemed cool at the time, his effect on me and my vision would have been tragic if not for the guy that walked down the street 10 years later when I was 17. You see, 10 years later when I was 17, I saw another guy walking down the street. I could sort of relate to him because he had a nappy afro. I noticed he had a comb sticking out from his hair, the kind with the metal teeth and with the clenched fist perched on top. Although his hair was not combed, this guy seemed to have it all together. He walked hard, fast, and with urgency. His legs and arms were thick and solidly built. His forearms and shoulders and chest reminded me of that of my favorite cartoon character, Popeye the Sailor Man. I could tell that he was a confident man as he strolled by because he winked at me. He then pounded his chest and pointed to me. I learned sign language that day. His message to me without saying a word was, "Much love, young brother. Stay strong." As he marched by, I returned the signal, pumping my chest and pointing back at him. I felt that he was the coolest person in the world that day for providing me with a quick moment of acceptance and a moment of pride. You see, the wink was more than a blink. Well, life can teach you some things at times if you pay attention. The one walking down that street that day, I'm talking about the guy with the Popeye arms and that winked and pounded his chest and pointed to me. Well, that guy was a pimp and a robber. He was on the move to make a move. He had argued with his parents and didn't want to listen. So his dad had instructed him to leave and never return. Weeks later, his mother was heartbroken after his lifeless body was discovered in the neighborhood across the tracks. But now as I reflect back on that day, in that wink and in that chest-pounding moment, I felt that he was the coolest person in the world. Question. I asked myself, how did my 17-year-old eyes fail to notice his flaws or overlook his major flawed character? Answer. Because he winked at me. Because he acknowledged me at a time when I needed to be acknowledged. He pounded and pointed in acceptance at a time when I needed it. In moments of desperate thirst, we will often accept water from any source for survival. I hope y'all hear me today. Although he was imperfect, I'm thankful for that moment because I felt acceptance. I felt acceptance at a time when I really needed it. But his effect on me today would have been tragic if not for the guy that walked down my street when I was 27. 10 years later, I want to tell you about a guy. 10 years later, when I was 27, I witnessed another guy walking down my street. This guy had shiny shoes and a tailored suit. He walked with a pace of calmness and determination. I perceived a straightness never before seen by my eyes as I looked and listened, as others whispered. My eyes would not look away as I counted the clicks of his shiny shoes as he approached with easiness and efficiency. Said he was carrying a hat in one hand and a book in the other hand. His haircut was smooth, neat, and well-rounded. He wore a skinny tie and a clean white shirt without wrinkles. I noticed that he was wearing a belt and his pants perfectly creased and were not sagging. When I was a youngster in church and I was a youngster at school, I was taught that people that dressed like this were called gentlemen, and that we should aspire to be like them, and we should aspire to talk like them, and we should aspire to dress like them. But as a youngster in my neighborhood by the tracks, I was also taught that people that dressed like this were called Uncle Toms, and they thought that they were better than us. They thought they were better than the unfortunate souls that couldn't afford to have a tailored suit or to have shiny shoes. You see, but this gentleman didn't give the appearance of arrogance. He was handsome, he was intelligent, and he seemed to have something to say. He seemed to have a message to deliver. He seemed to be able to get along with anyone and everyone. As he strolled by, I tried to discover the name of the book that he was carrying, but his gloved hand covered half of his title. But I could spell out part of the uncovered title. I saw a B-I-B as he passed through the crowd. Well, he didn't notice me, but I didn't mind because he seemed to have a bigger plan and bigger vision. As he continued his journey down the street, I noticed that many others began to follow his path. This guy really had a huge impact on me. I felt he was the most important person in the world for coming to my town and walking down my street and providing us with a moment of pride and inspiration. You see, in moments of desperate thirst, we will often accept water from any source for survival. I feel very fortunate and will always remember those three important guys that walked down the street. Although imperfect, they all contributed to the man that I eventually became. As I think of them individually, I accept the fact that each provided something that I really needed at the time. But I will always remember the guy walking down the street that day with the skinny tie and the shiny shoes. You see, that guy that was slowly walking with patience in a tailored suit, I will never forget him. See, if we forget those that are lost, then we really lose those we remember. Like I said, he had a cool tie, a clean white shirt without wrinkles, a belt, and perfectly creased pants that were not sagging. Some called him a reverend. Some called him an Uncle Tom. But I heard many call him a king. Today, he's the king. He's not a Trump. He's not a Spade. He's not an Uncle Tom. Today and forever, he is a king, Dr. King. Finally, a doctor came to my street to make a house call. I got to see a doctor walk down my street and deliver medicine to the needy minds. That doctor later told our neighborhood that about a mountaintop and that we would have to travel to. And he also informed us that he may not get there, but he wanted for us to get to the mountaintop. His purpose was for someday for America to get there. Dr. King really had a huge impact on me. I'm grateful for mine eyes have seen a lot of glory at that moment. That moment instilled vision. That moment instilled hope. That moment instilled pride and inspiration and purpose. Purpose to aim, purpose to reach, and purpose to achieve our potential. You see, Dr. King's message is powerful, but it's also so simple. so simple that it's not beyond the reach of our daily lives. His message of hope was not beyond the troubled little boy. His message of justice was not beyond the mothers of slain children. His message of purpose was not beyond the raped straight-A student whose life became a zero, but recovered to become our hero. His message of purpose was not beyond protection of those left out, for someday you will have protection for you and your situation. His message of justice was not beyond you, it was for you. It was for your neighbors, it was for your town, it was for your state, your region, and our nation. You see, his message to believe and to dream, it's universal. Love will conquer. Faith and hope will provide the patience you need. Love, faith, and disappointment are partners that lead to success. You see, Dr. King taught us that anger and hate will chase a successful path away. Anger and hate has a way of making your grandmother's pork chops and mashed potatoes taste too salty. Anger and hate are in partnership for failure and underachievement. You see, idle regret must become regrets of action. As I reflect back to the gentleman that I remembered at 27, I thank God that he provided us with the direction to overcome. If not for his hope, if not for his vision, if not for his purpose, his assassination would have been too tragic, too much for us to handle. But his dream for America prepared us. His dream for America prepared us, healed us. His dream, his message, and his purpose was bigger than life. There is tragedy from all three guys that walked down our street and invaded our environment. There is a message from all three guys that can help us, that can teach us, but more importantly, the messages that can prepare us for life. Our experiences are different, but the end result is our choice, not the choice of our circumstances. Our visions are sometimes limited because of fear and temporary walls. In today's message, it took 27 years for the young man to gain vision. For you, it may take many more, and for others, it may not take as long. But I must acknowledge the fact that those that walk in and out of our lives are valuable in some way. Good or bad, it takes many years for our environmental visions to show us enough, for us to gain enough experience and to teach us enough about the type of man or woman we want to become. You see, God is amazing. As Dr. King walked down the streets of America, I asked myself, how did my 27-year-old eyes capture his message in the very moment of his invasion? After that moment, I realized the type of man that I wanted to become. See, many times our environmental or personal needs will blind us in regards to morality. As you live in the trenches, suppliers of basic human needs will appear, disappear, and reappear in an instant in many acceptable and unacceptable forms. I hope you hear me today. Moral observations will often take a back seat if being smothered by negative influences, negative environmental influences. But in conclusion, there will be times when change will occur instantly without drastic changes in our environment. Such was the case of Dr. King. Dr. King carried a message that was so powerful that it made you stop instantly. His message illuminated flawed character. Sometimes your environment will teach you things. Sometimes your environment will show you things. But sometimes the most important contribution of your environment will be for you to discover other things. God bless you today. Happy birthday, MLK.